Thank you for joining us, everybody. Look, despite elections, despite pandemics, despite fires, we still have our statutory responsibility to submit a balanced budget for the state of Colorado on the first Monday in November, and we are doing so. We submitted our balanced budget today. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to walking you through our fiscal year 21-22 budget for those following from home. This is the budget that starts July 1st of 2021. And continues through the end of June for the following year. And of course, this is just the start of the budgetary process. The budget is written by the Joint Budget Committee, a special committee of our Colorado State Legislature that's bicamerally composed of Republicans and Democrats from the House and Senate, then has to go to both chambers, ultimately has to be signed by the governor. But this is just the beginning of that process today with our balanced budget that we're submitting here. Before we get into those details, I just want to briefly again address the COVID trends, and they do tie into the budget. We are seeing very alarming, concerning trends in Colorado. 3 days in a row with more than 2,500 cases. Now remember, 6 weeks ago we had 400 cases a day. Now 2,500 cases a day. We're reaching an alarming inflection point. If this trend continues, our hospitals will run out of capacity in the weeks ahead. So we're not doing a good enough job, my fellow Coloradans. We need to do better wearing masks when we're around others, limiting social interactions, avoiding social gatherings. Just for a few critical weeks here into the holiday season, let's avoid getting together so that we can see our loved ones over the holidays. Washing your hands regularly when you get home if you absolutely have to go out, and of course physically distancing if you need to be around others, keeping 6, 8, 10 feet away. This affects our budget situation because Colorado's economic strength depends on our strength in containing the COVID virus and preventing additional loss of life and economic damage because of consumer behavior or deterring tourism that would ensue very likely from an increase in viral rates, which is happening across our entire country, and sadly Colorado is no exception to that. Today, I'm proud to unveil our balanced fiscal year 2021-22 budget proposal that is designed from the ground up to help Coloradans address the challenges we face, support our small businesses, provide relief to hardworking Coloradans, while making a significant investment in our future to boost our economy, to have a quicker and stronger economic recovery, and build lasting legacies for Colorado's future. This budget, very simply, contains 3 elements that will help jumpstart Colorado's economy, make key investments in our state's future. First, it restores major reductions that were made to key areas in fiscal year 2021 and ensure access to critical services across the government. Second, an economic stimulus that will bridge us to recovery, help build us back stronger, invest in jobs and growth, helping Coloradans get back to work while ensuring that we're making investments that benefit us for decades to come. This budget isn't just about getting back to where we used to be. That wasn't good enough. It's about taking this challenging time, this difficult time, to utilize lessons learned and boldly forge a path that positions our state for the future in a more equitable way by making key strategic investments to show that we build back stronger, more inclusive, and more resilient, and saving for the future. This budget calls for restoring reserves to historic levels because of the historic uncertainty around future years and what this economic recovery would look like, and the large difference between the legislative forecast and the OSPB forecast. We don't want to just get back to where we were before the pandemic. We want to build back even stronger Colorado, and I know that together we can. This slide walks us through why and how we can achieve these goals. Colorado's economy is improving, but the forecast projects an annual operating deficit through 2023. That's the red on the graphic. We know this recession is going to affect our budget for years to come, which is why we're acting strategically now to make our government more efficient. One-time funds carried forward, those are shown in green, can now be used to do 2 critical things: to reduce the deficit and to stimulate the economy now to help Colorado recover faster and better in the private sector and for the state budget, which reflects our private sector success. Investment in a robust and rapid recovery, coupled with strong reserves, is the best way to ease budget pressure in future years. Coloradans have been through a lot this year. For us, it just hasn't been the global pandemic alone. It's been historic wildfires, racial reckoning, civil unrest. Each of these crises is a reminder of how important it is that we dig deep and work hard to continue moving forward to create a better future for the state of Colorado. This epidemic has exposed many of the weaknesses in our system and forced us to think about the ways that we can all do better. If there's one thing we've learned about during this pandemic, it's that the issues that affect all of us, our schools, healthcare, climate change, economic stability, are more important than ever before and have truly become kitchen table issues for Colorado families. With this budget, we're restoring the painful cuts that were made in fiscal year 2021 and ensuring that the critical services that Coloradans depend on can continue. It's imperative that we maintain the important services that Coloradans rely on. Total funds, $35.4 billion, general fund, $13.6 billion, and agency operating budget 7.3% above fiscal year 2019 and 20. During this last legislative session, difficult decisions had to be made, including painful budget cuts. I'm proud that in this budget, we're able to restore the major reductions that had to be made over the last summer. We restore and increase per pupil funding for education by $902 per student. And that returns the budget stabilization factor for 2019 and 20 to $572 million, leaving the funding gap for our schools at an 11-year low. We restore funding for higher education to 2019-2020 levels, and we maintain financial aid for students who need it. We restore funding for the para-direct distribution to protect pensions for public servants, and we fund caseload needs and Medicaid and human services based on the actuals and what's needed, and we invest in high-need capital projects. The most important investment that we all make as a state and that we make in our future is in our children and is in education. This school year has been nothing like what anyone expected, and the pandemic has exposed the importance of having a safe environment where our kids can learn. Many families are experiencing the challenges of remote learning when they have to go online for a period of days or weeks if there's a outbreak in a cohort or at a school. And I want to thank our state's educators, staff, school leaders, and others who are working harder than ever before and adapting and showing that flexibility to help get kids the education they deserve. It's not easy when you've been in person and then all of a sudden having your third grade class go to online for 2 weeks before you can go back to in person. That flexibility is difficult. There's even schools in Colorado that haven't fully come back physically, and we hope that they're able to do so in the days and weeks ahead. But these interruptions and the flexibility that our educators and families have shown is really an example of rising to the occasion. As I noted on my last slide, this budget increases funding to the highest level, and we're excited to make that investment in our public schools. Since day one, my top priority has been the health and safety of Coloradans, and that continues today. In the early days of the pandemic, we acted swiftly to ramp up testing, setting up community testing sites across the state, free, quick, and easy to get tested. We worked to secure our own protective equipment on the national and international markets in the absence of leadership from the federal government. And we built up a contact tracing system to help contain the virus. But the pandemic is not over. Far from it. We're ending many of our darkest days as a nation with the number of case counts nationally and in Colorado. And we have a more important role than ever before to play in limiting the spread of this deadly disease. Most Coloradans, myself included, are just plain tired of this virus. But as I've said before, the virus is not yet tired of us. The state is using $577 million in available state and federal funds for mass testing, personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, support for local health agencies, contact tracing, and improved patient care capacity. To prepare for future expenses, we propose $179 million to repay emergency spending from the state emergency reserve, and another $200 million set aside in the budget for additional COVID-19 response costs in 2021. This is money that we hope that the federal government steps up and invests in the response, But we prepare this balanced budget package in the absence of a federal stimulus or health response. So we have to prepare for all contingencies. Whether the federal government helps us or not, our health response in Colorado will cost an additional $200 million. So we're making room for that in this budget. If the federal government does come through, it would free up that $200 million for other purposes. This year, Colorado has experienced the biggest 3 wildfires in the entire history of our state. Nothing has even come close to what we've experienced in 2020. Thousands of Coloradans were displaced by the fires. At least 2 lives were lost. It's too early to know how many homes and structures were damaged. To this day, many families haven't even been able to return home to see if they have a home or what state it's in. Our budget recommends $78 million to improve the state's ability to prevent, respond to, and recover from wildfires that are driven by a changing climate and increased population. While we can't go back in time, 5 or 10 years, and change the trajectory for this year's wildfire season, we can do everything in our power to reduce the severity of future fires. Many hardworking Coloradans have been suffering as a result of the economic challenges that this pandemic has posed. Coloradans are incredibly resilient, and we're doing everything we can to provide relief to those who've been impacted. I'm proud to say that Colorado has experienced one of the smaller drops in gross domestic product, GDP, due to COVID in the entire nation, evidence that our state is well positioned for a strong economic recovery. But we cannot take that for granted, and that's little consolation to the many families who find themselves in a very difficult situation, worried about how they can make their rent or put food on the table. That's why we're working to help move Colorado in the right direction by putting forth an economic stimulus and recovery package to strengthen our economy. In total, this package includes $1.3 billion to support local businesses, put Coloradans back to work, and invest in our state's future. We're utilizing targeted proposals with a high economic impact and strategic investments to help Colorado recover stronger and more quickly and leave a lasting legacy that improves our quality of life and the efficiency of our economy. These investments fall into 2 major categories. First, recovery. These are immediate actions we are taking to and should take to help Coloradans through the winter of this pandemic, the dark winter that the nation faces. And building back stronger. Stimulus package to supercharge our recovery and our economy, giving Colorado a competitive advantage to climb out quicker and faster and more boldly from this recession than any other state. And that includes $200 million for legislative priorities. We'll go over these priorities on another slide in a moment. But while Washington, D.C. continues to bicker about a new relief package, many people across our state and country are struggling without the support they need. But in Colorado, we do what we can to take care of our own. That's why last week, in partnership with the legislature, we took action to direct payments into the pockets of hardworking Coloradans who've suffered job loss due to this pandemic. I announced we're distributing a one-time direct payment of $375 to 435,000 hardworking Coloradans, middle income and low income. These payments will go out by the first week in December. That's an important first step to fill the void that the federal government has left and help those who've been hardest hit by this recession. It's not their fault. We're also proposing $105 million in tax relief and direct aid for restaurants, bars, and other small businesses that are hit by capacity restrictions and lack of consumer confidence. Our small businesses are what make up the fabric of our communities. And we want to make sure that the state is there to partner with them to help them get through the difficult winter months, especially with reduced outdoor dining capacity. This pandemic has also laid bare the weaknesses and inequalities in our system that already existed but have only been highlighted during a pandemic. Communities of color have been hit particularly hard. We want to make sure our recovery is equitable and helps those who have been most impacted by the pandemic. That's why the stimulus and investment proposal includes $50 million to prevent housing evictions and direct benefits for individuals who aren't eligible for other assistance, $50 million in support for child care providers to help the workforce return to work, more than $30 million in grants and technical assistance for communities that have traditionally had difficulty accessing capital, and as a dedicated strategic fund the Minority Business Office, $4 million in grants for local law enforcement to purchase body cameras, and $1 million to help Colorado identify and begin to address health disparities. As we begin to recover, we don't want to just get back to where we were before. We want an even better Colorado, an even better America. We want to make strategic investments that not only boost our economy in the short and medium term, but support Colorado's economic and cultural vitality far into the future. To build back stronger than before, our stimulus package includes $220 million to create jobs by investing in shovel-ready public works and infrastructure projects, $160 million to invest in broadband infrastructure to enable businesses, education, and healthcare, especially in rural Colorado, $140 million to invest in our workforce and incentivize businesses to come and grow and expand in the great state of Colorado, and a $200 million placeholder for one-time investments and stimulus priorities of Republicans and Democrats in the legislature. We want everybody's ideas to help Colorado get through this quicker than any other state and resume our economic growth as a leading state in the nation. Well, this budget has important relief that helps Coloradans now. We also know they're going to be dealing with the economic impact of the pandemic for years ahead. That's why we're taking action to save funds for Colorado's future. Not only do we want to do everything we can to support Coloradans today, we want to be a model steward of taxpayer dollars. In the last quarter of 2019 and 20, revenue plummeted as a result of COVID-19, and the state's reserves were wiped out in just a few months. This budget proposal would increase our reserves to the highest level ever. General fund reserves from 2.86% to 10% for 2021-22. We carry forward $1.26 billion to reduce the deficit in 22-23 and protect against the great uncertainty. And we propose a responsible savings package of $422 million, of which $272 million is general fund. While we've restored the most painful cuts, we're doing responsible savings wherever we can. These efforts to find savings predate the pandemic, but they're made even more urgent and more important by the times that we live in. This Budget Navigator is a guide to help connect the requests in this budget to our public-facing dashboard and our values. This dashboard is a transparent tool to help Coloradans follow along progress on the goals we've set. The Navigator is organized into our Bold 4 and the investments we're making in our Bold 4 areas: 100% renewable energy, saving people money on health care, early childhood education, and tax reform, and the Stimulus and Economic Recovery Budget Navigator. Transparency continues to be our priority, and we want to make sure Coloradans see exactly how these budget requests tie in with our goals and our values. This budget is for the people of Colorado. It's about the challenges that families face with uncertainty in their job, reduced hours, having to teach a kid at home on and off. I've been proud to see how our state and community have responded to these challenges, but we are not yet in the clear. We have a long road ahead of us. First, on the health side, where we know we need to do a better job now, avoiding socializing with others, wearing a mask in public, washing our hands, and keeping our distance. And on the economic side, which will have a longer tail. But I know that together, we're going to come out the other side of this even stronger and more resilient than when we started. As we look into Colorado's bright future, we have an opportunity to not just build back, but build back stronger. And I look forward to working with our General Assembly to move Colorado further down the path of a robust and rapid economic recovery. Thank you. We're happy to take some questions.
In the beginning, you mentioned that the budget is very much tied to the coronavirus and how it's impacted by that. Over the weekend, there was a huge spike in the positivity rate. What's behind that in your estimation, and do you have any plans to further restrictions after the election?
We are seeing a national increase, hitting historic highs in coronavirus daily counts. Well over 40 states have increases, Colorado among them. We are hitting our historic high case counts. Our hospitalization numbers continue to increase. I hope that this is a wake-up call to Coloradans that this is not the time for coronavirus fatigue. We need to do an even better job, as we did in August, living our lives in a sustainable way, but not socializing unless absolutely necessary, wearing a mask whenever you're in a store or workplace or in public, washing your hands whenever you come home or handle a product, washing your hands with soap, and keeping your distance if you absolutely have to interact with somebody, trying to keep 6, 8, 10 feet away while you're both wearing masks. We have to do better. We must do better. It's about saving lives. It's also about our economic recovery. Colorado has fared better economically, in large part because we've fared better from a health perspective. That is very much at risk in over 40 states, and we need to make sure that Coloradans continue to step up to meet the challenges of the day.
You've talked about trying to bring our reserves back up to a responsible level, but we also need funds to fix the budget problem right now. I want to figure out how you begin to make that balanced decision, because I know it's a difficult one to do.
So the budget deficit is more significant in the 2022-2023 year. With the one-time carry forwards from the current fiscal year, we're able to make a stimulus and investment in the immediate future to have a quicker and more robust recovery and have a historic reserve level of 10%. Now, I would point out that historic reserve level is also very uncertain because there's a big difference between the legislative forecast and our forecast. But there's also a lot of upside there. For instance, the $200 million that we have allocated for coronavirus response, we sure hope that at the very least Congress gets its act together to fund the health response nationally. That would free up that $200 million to add to the reserve or be spent on the stimulus and investment to recover quicker and sooner.
Colorado State Forest Service has identified a $4.2 billion backlog of forestry work. $78 million for wildfire prevention and response obviously puts some small dent in that. But what is the long-term plan on that front, given the enormity of that backlog?
This is largely a question of our federal partnership. Most of the land impacted by the fires was Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service land. The Pine Gulch fire was predominantly BLM, Department of Interior land. Obviously some private land and state land affected. But the forest management practices are an area that the federal government, in partnership with our state, frankly needs to step up. And I think that with what's happened in Idaho and California and Colorado and many other states, there'll be renewed pressure on Congress to have a truly national response to better stewardship and better fire prevention on our public lands. We fund a stronger state response that includes forest resiliency, includes equipment, includes doing what we can at the state level. But we really need to make sure that whoever wins this November election and is in authority in Washington, that we have a strong relationship to do better mitigation with regard to our federal lands.
Hi, this is Mary Ann Goodland with Colorado Politics. Do you know what the exact number is that you want to add to the general fund reserve?
Yes, Lauren Larson can answer that. I know it's 10%, and she'll give you the figure.
Thanks, Governor. Marian, it's 1.26 billion is the complete reserve, and that's adding about 900 million to an existing 300 million.
Hello, Governor. I'm Jesus Carrasquel from Noticias Univisión, Colorado. Governor, tomorrow is the election day. Please, in Spanish, ¿cómo se prepara el Estado para posibles protestas el día de mañana?
Su vota es su voz. Por favor, vote mañana. Es la cosa más importante para la futura de nuestro Estado y de nuestro país. Las elecciones son una parte más importante de nuestra democracia y es muy importante ser un parte de las elecciones. Si usted no puede votar, tal vez tiene familia y amigos quien pueden votar y ser su voz también. Por favor, recuerda a ellos que es una responsabilidad de ser ciudadano para votar. Y todos deben votar mañana. Si todavía tiene su balata, es demasiado tarde para regresarlo por correo regular. Por favor, usa un buzón oficial de elección o regrésalo en un polling place or county clerk office. Si no recibieron el boleta y usted es ciudadano, todavía puede votar. Ir en propia a una elección lugar mañana en un county clerk office. Usa el sitio de red govotecolorado.gov.
If I can just have a follow-up question to the one I asked a while ago. The numbers spiked dramatically over the weekend. What do you feel is behind this? What's your message to the people of Colorado? The number went up significantly.
It's been more than this last weekend. This has been the extremely alarming trend. It's really a all bell alarm now for our hospital capacity and for our state. It is coronavirus fatigue. It is people in social gatherings that are unstructured. It's just living our everyday lives in a different way than we did in July and August when we had this under control. And we we can't go back to how we lived our lives in January, February before the pandemic yet. And I think people want to. We all want to. But it's far from over. And this is a stark and deadly reminder that we need to wake up, see the danger, stay home whenever we can, wear masks whenever we're around others, wash our hands regularly, and be safe.
Hello, Governor. This is Vinny Del Giudice at Bloomberg News in Denver. 3 budget questions, if I may. Is bond issuance anticipated to help balance the budget? Is the Federal Reserve's municipal lending facility under consideration? And what are the chances for state and local aid if the president remains in office? Thank you very much, sir.
So those are all no answers on the first. We don't use any thing that doesn't exist today to balance this budget. It's a budget that is balanced under current law. If there are new opportunities that are made available through the Fed or through a relief package, we will certainly participate in those, but we do not count on any of those as part of this. I believe your third question was about my prognosis for a federal package and what that might contain. Vince, was that right? Yeah, I'm confident that if there is another federal relief package, and I'm optimistic there will be, that it will likely include some local and state aid as part of that, certainly to fund the health response, but most likely, depending on the outcome election, some additional resources that can be used to help stimulate the economy and backfill some of the difficult decisions that local governments in the state have had to make. But we don't assume any of that in this budget. We're delivering a balanced budget with what we have today based on the forecasts, and there remains upside if there is federal stimulus.
Governor or Director Larson, for either of you, I'm curious how this year's budgeting process compares to the previous 2 in your administration. The forecasts have had a lot of fluctuation over recent months. Obviously, we have ballot measures coming up that could affect the bottom line in any number of directions. And so I wonder how you guys prepare for what seems like more uncertainty this time than in past years.
There's great uncertainty in the budget projections between the legislative and executive branch. As is our custom, we will be, when I testify before the Joint Budget Committee on the 12th, we will include a budget letter that accounts for any changes from the election that we are having tomorrow. But fundamentally, this is a budget that, in the face of great uncertainty, tries to provide more certainty for Colorado families and small businesses by helping get through this difficult period. I think the timing and sequencing is different than a traditional budget, meaning we've already acted on one element that's accounted for in here, namely the direct aid to people who are unemployed. We hope to work with Republicans and Democrats in the legislature on a number of these items ahead of the long bill in the normal budget process because they're simply more urgent. They're accounted for in the same global package. But from a process perspective, we're really looking forward to thinking creatively with our Republican and Democratic leaders about how we can meet this need and meet the need of Colorado small businesses and families in their time of need. Lauren, do you want to talk about how it's different?
I'd say the governor, since day one in office, has prepared his administration to be good fiscal stewards by focusing on what's the spending in the base, not what are just the new increases they're requesting, And so the administration has a discipline of really looking deep to find where can we find savings. And just like last year, this budget includes a responsible package of savings proposals. So in some ways, we were well prepared to follow the same process that we put in place before the pandemic.
Like everybody, Alex, we did most of it virtually. A lot of Zooms, a lot of calls, not gathered around long conference tables late into the evening at work, but we did it at home with, babies making cameo appearances from time to time and dogs. And just like everybody, we're learning to get our work done in a different way.
Hey, Governor Polis and Lauren, this is John Frank at the Colorado Sun. I've got a series of questions I'm hoping you can help me with. Let's start with the $1.3 billion stimulus. How much of that is general fund? And can you talk a little bit more about that funding source? I think I see in here TBD next to the business help. Is that right?
So I didn't hear your second part there, something about TBD. What was that?
Yes, sir. The one, is it 105 million for businesses or 150 million it might be? I'm trying to figure out where that money comes from. I think I saw something in the budget that said TBD. So I'm hoping you can talk more about how much of the stimulus is general fund and where specifically you're getting the rest from.
Okay, I'll have Lauren address it, but no, it is not TBD. This is money that is actually there, that is going to the stimulus. So I don't know what the TBD was. Let's go to the slide that shows the graph with the red and the orange, and Lauren can kind of speak to where the money comes from for the stimulus and investment.
Yes, the
TBD is on page 46 in case it's helpful, line 11 in your chart. Maybe that's a reference to a fund I'm not aware of the acronym for, though.
46. Page 46. Lauren, do you see that?
Oh, it's that's because it's a new program and the account number hasn't been set up yet.
That's what I think. Thank you.
The fiscal, the full stimulus.
Go to the one with the graph that shows the red and the green gap in the money. Keep going. This one.
There we go.
Lauren will speak. This one answers your question, and Lauren will walk you through it.
So the full stimulus package is general fund. How do we get here where there's enough, where we have funds to invest in stimulus? You can see in the green chart here, the revenues came in over and above where the budget was set. So in the bottom line is where the revenue forecast was in May, where the budget was set to. The revenue came in higher, that's the C line, and the difference is the green. That's one-time funds, because we bounced back a little faster, a little more than we expected, but we're still forecasting annual operating deficits well into the future. That's the red. So the governor's proposing to do 3 things with these green one-time funds. The first is to restore major cuts. The second is to invest in a package of stimulus. And the third is to carry funds forward for future uncertainty.
And when it comes to these cuts of 272 million general fund, I see one of them anticipates that the state government workforce will work from home for I guess 2 more years, it looks like. Can you talk a little bit more about where those cuts are coming from? And one final question going the other direction. Can you talk about what shovel-ready projects you're envisioning to spend money on immediately?
So the savings right now from changes in the workforce, we are hoping to reimagine government and how we deliver services. That is not contributing to a major piece of the budgetary savings at this point, although it could in the future. For shovel-ready projects, the Department of Transportation has a number of projects in both rural and urban areas that are ready to go, and if they can get an increase in funds for this fiscal year, that those can create jobs and dollars in the economy right away. We're also wanting to create jobs through, think about the Civilian Conservation Corps back from early in the recovery from the Great Depression. We're looking at investing in projects that build our public works, expand our campgrounds, improve, help our park system with its increasing 50% jump in capacity and visitors that they've had over the past multiple years. And so this is a package that, if funded quickly, can add jobs and can help prepare and make our state better for the future.
Hi, Jason Gonzalez with Chuck Beat, Colorado. How realistic is it to restore all of the educational budget cuts from last year? And what happens if Amendment B fails and Proposition 116 passes?
So if we can go to our school finance slide, please, with the chart. $902 per student is how much is being increased. Lowest budget stabilization factor in 11 years, lowest as a percent. Really investing in our schools and putting our schools first. There are several initiatives, of course, that affect the fiscal situation. We will be providing an amendment to our budget request, as we do traditionally by the 12th for my testimony to the Joint Budget Committee. I would point out, though, that we don't see any of the initiatives as materially affecting the budget. Certainly, if EE passed, it could provide some additional funding for K-12, but this budget will be balanced regardless of any of the initiatives that are on the ballot.
Hi, Governor. Ed Seelover with the Denver Business Journal. Just two quick questions on your efforts to help businesses here. One, can you talk high level about where the $140 million in business incentive and growth funding is going? And secondly, of the $105 million for restaurants and bars, those are industries that have asked first and foremost for a rollback in regulations. Talk about balancing that request versus what you've done instead and giving them more money here.
So it's all in our budget document, Ed, and this is available online now, and you can get it. Good. This is the details on the 140 million. So here's where that goes. 40 million to promote upskilling and credential completion. 40 million for clean energy finance. 30 million for small businesses via Colorado Startup Loan Fund. 10 million to the Advanced Industries Accelerator Grant Program, 15 million to attract new businesses via OEDIT Strategic Fund, and 5 million to the Clean Energy Challenge for local governments. So that's the composition of the 140 million. Existing programs and about upskilling of people to meet the needs of the emerging workforce, about financing and bridging that capital gap, about attracting new businesses to Colorado through the Strategic Fund. So those are the big areas there. On the restaurant and businesses that are impacted by capacity, that's 105 million. That is proposed tax relief, meaning they would be able to retain their state sales tax for 4 months. Restaurants, that's 2.9%. For those that are affected by more severe capacity restrictions, like 25%, or if they have to close indoor services because of the health situation in a certain area, then there could be direct grant aid and funding to those businesses that are affected by those health orders. So, very much in line with the bipartisan national stimulus that included Paycheck Protection Program and others. We don't have the ability to do anything of that scale here in Colorado. But what we can do is, if local health authorities are asking a restaurant to not have dine-in or go to 25% capacity, the state should really step up and make sure that the payroll can be met and the rent can be met, and that they can get through that month-long period or however long it lasts to be able to grow and retain their employees. And then, of course, on the sales tax retention, 2.9% is very significant for a restaurant with very low margins, and many that are on the edge or losing a little bit of money will be able to keep their employees on and stay open with their reduced dine-in and their dine-out and their takeout and whatever combination works for them.
There's somewhere in the range of 200,000 unauthorized immigrants living in Colorado. These are people who have missed out on federal stimulus money. These are people who are not going to get the $375 stimulus money through the $375 stimulus program you guys just announced. Is there anything in this budget that offers some relief to that community? And then also more generally, moving forward, what, if anything, do you hope to see in terms of relief for people in that community who've missed out on it for all these months?
Well, I would call upon Congress and the President to prioritize immigration reform for our over 200,000 aspiring Americans that live in Colorado. Frequently, we are prevented from using federal funds for direct benefit. We don't have those same restrictions on our state funds, and so absolutely we view Dreamers and other Coloradans who live here and work here and are an important part of Colorado's success. We view them as very much a part of our state as anybody else, and the failure of the government to act on immigration reform should not be held against long-term Colorado residents who are critical parts of our community. And so when housing and rental assistance and direct benefits and those kinds of programs would also benefit individuals who are not eligible for other assistance, because we don't have those same restrictions that we would have under federal funding. Thank you.